to Track Announcer's Notebook for Monday, August 30th. Our special guest is Steve Baker for the first half of the show as we take a look back on the career and celebrate a great tuner and mechanic, Bob Work, who worked with Steve Baker and was there with him for his Daytona 200 win and his Formula 750 World Championship, among many other years of racing. And then the second half of the show, we're going to shift gears and talk about CSBK and what has been an incredible pro superbike championship. We've got Alex Duhamel with us. And if the stars align, Ben Young is going to be joining us as well. So as always, we kick off the show with Nodell's notes. And Stuart, we're going to send it over to you. And we've got an added treat for those who may not have been able to catch our tribute to Yvon Duhamel last week. You've selected 17 of the amazing photos that Bill Petro had sent us from the Cycle Canada archives.
Yeah, thanks, Pat. And like I said to you before when we were talking, it was probably the toughest thing to do to put together the slideshow was the 17 photos. But we'll start off with some sad news that legendary Yamaha tuner Bob Work passed away last week.
Yeah, I met Bob the first year I was at Mosport announcing in 1973, and of course he was working for Deeley Yamaha at the time. They had an amazing team of 3 riders in the East, including our guest from last week, Jim Allen, and 3 riders in the West, including Steve Baker, who has joined us here tonight. But Bob was an icon. The last time I saw him was in 2014, when both he and Steve Baker were inducted into the Canadian Motorcycle Hall of Fame. And I've got to say it was an honor to MC the Hall of Fame induction. And somewhere in the collection of photos that Bill Petro took was one of me standing there with Bob Work and Steve Baker. That takes me right back to my very first year of announcing motorcycle races in 1973.
Then on some other sad news, Pete Swedish had sent this in to us, Pat, and Pete says this guy was a much bigger super fan than he and Carol. We definitely have to acknowledge Jack Robson of Guelph, Ontario. Yeah,
Jack and his wife Mary pictured there. They were absolutely amazing race fans. You know, the early years at Shannonville, and they would go to Mosport / Canadian Tire Motorsport Park, and they would travel to the United States, to Daytona, and I think Mid-Ohio, and really became friends with quite a number of racers, including Michael Taylor, who I spoke to, 2-time Canadian Superbike champion, earlier today, and he was saddened to know that the sport of motorcycle road racing had indeed lost one of his super fans. Our condolences to Mary, his wife, and the entire Robson family.
And then on some positive news with regard to Mike Grass, late last week he was transported to a London area hospital where he was taken off his ventilator and he was breathing on his own. But we learned earlier this evening, Pat, that Mike is alert and awake and has been communicating a little bit with his wife. And they had an amazing fundraiser for him this past weekend during the SOAR Regional Series out at Grand Bend.
Yeah, the news has certainly been very promising, and hopefully Mike continues to recover. But I think there's still a long way to go. I mean, he had traumatic head injuries, and we don't know the extent of those injuries, and probably won't for some time yet. But it's really wonderful to see how the entire motorcycle road racing community has come together, particularly his fellow racers and the whole community down there with the SOAR series. And, you know, we hope he continues to come around and improve.
Yeah, the GoFundMe page they have going for him, Pat, it's up just over $24,000 as of earlier today. And I know there was a big raffle that went on this weekend, and Kelly Holmes, who was really spearheading the whole effort, should be commended. She did a great job, and she's going to give an update for what they were able to collect for Mike and his family this last weekend.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And then in MotoGP news, they were back at it this past weekend. They raced in England at Silverstone, and Fabio Quartararo, he basically has command of this championship, Pat. He's pretty dominant. When he wanted to go right to the lead, he did without much of a challenge, and then really built a good, 4-second cushion over second place, and was really unchallenged. But really the nice story in this class this weekend was the very first podium for Aprilia and Alex Espargaro.
Indeed. It has been, an interesting season, of course, for North American fans. October 1, 2, 3, the race at COTA is on. Henry DeGao, who's on with us, he's going to get some VIP passes from what we understand. So Henry's going to be our reporter, and on our Monday, October the 4th edition of Track Announcers Notebook, Henry's going to walk us through his MotoGP weekend at COTA, hopefully with some really cool photos and a bit of a report on what that weekend was like. I suppose for Canadian race fans, you can fly to Texas. You got to go through the usual quarantine and COVID test requirements. You can't technically drive across the border, but you certainly can fly. And wouldn't be surprised if there are a few Canadian fans down there. But Henry DeGao is going to be covering that and reporting for Track Announcers Notebook. He'll be on October the 4th.
And then just the follow-up of the standings, Pat, and here you can see the top 5. And Fabio Quartararo over Joan Mir is a pretty significant points gap, 65 points. And then Johan Zarco, who's in third, who struggled this past weekend. But I think it's Quartararo's to lose at this point.
Yeah, but behind him there, you can see it's still pretty tight there for the rest of the top 5.
That's right. And then they're up racing again in a couple of weeks at Aragon Motorland in Spain. And then wanted to give a shout out to our friend of the show, rookie pro Jordan Royce, had his first win this past weekend in the open sprint class out at Grand Bend.
Yeah, Jordan was coming off a nice weekend at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park, working with Michael Taylor and Michael's old mechanic, Brian Buckley. I think they got the IBEW Canada BMW sorted out. He had 3 top 10 finishes, a 10th and a couple of 9ths, and it looks like he took that momentum into the sole round at Grand Bend.
And then in the featured class out at Grand Bend, Pat, I talked to a number of people, and the guy to watch there is Trevor Dion. He's a rookie pro. This is from round 1, really. He was winning the first 600 race of the year. They did get a super bike just prior to, I think, the second round, and this was really his first race on it, and he won handily. But and you can see his lap times he's just just around a minute, almost a minute and 1 around the racetrack. So I think we should watch for him for in the future.
Well, that might be a name we'll be hearing in CSBK Superbike in 2022. Just one of a number of very talented riders, who are going to be prominent in the years to come.
And their championship is stacking up. You can see he's got quite a commanding lead. I know Steven Nickerson was absent this weekend, so that reflects in the standings, but and I would expect Steven to put on quite a run for that championship.
And there's the ageless wonder, Scott Rupert. I think he's got to be racing now into his 3rd decade. Usually runs down there sitting 4th in the championship. That's
right. And then in the Pro 600 class, Kawasaki rider backed by Scott Miller and Fast Company, David McKay took the victory in that class.
Yeah, and some other familiar names there. Matt Simpson, who's been contesting the CSBK Amateur Sport Bike Championship. He actually showed up a couple of weeks ago on the Sunday at round 2 of the Super Series, and ended up winning their amateur sport bike class. And so Matt getting in lots of racing at almost every track you can race on in Ontario. And of course, he'll be at Calabogie for the final CSBK round coming up September 17th, 18th.
Yeah, and Chris Putch had a strong weekend too, last year's Pro 600 champion. And when you look at the 600 class, it's the championship's still on. They've got a couple rounds left to go. But I think you're right. Matt's kind of like the Frank Trombino. I remember him back in the early 2000s, late 90s, showing up to Shannonville on a Sunday and starting from the back.
Yeah, the Superbike Depot Pro 600 looks like it's going to go down to the final round in October before it gets decided, as was the case a year ago, where we had, I think, a three-rider battle for that championship. So if we're not tied up, I think I'm going to make my annual trek to Grand Bend Stewart and catch that final round of the Source Series.
For sure. And I think they usually do a Thanksgiving potluck meal, Pat. So you might want to get there a little bit early, because I know it's one of the more popular events on their weekend. And then in the amateur 600, Jordan Bauer took the win, and you can see Matt Simpson did finish second in the amateur race.
Yeah, and SOAR does invite up, I think, the top 5 amateurs to run with the pros, just to fill out that grid. So, there's a lot of fast amateurs this year. I think they're going to be moving up into the pro ranks for 2022. And I think they could use a few more riders on the grid in all of the pro 600, whether it's sport bike or extreme classes.
Yeah, for sure. And looking at some of these fast amateurs, I know Reg Pay, when I was up there back at their last round, he was quite dominant in the amateur class, and his lap times were not far off from the top 5 Pro 600 riders. That's usually a good indication that a guy can make the jump. And then in the amateur superbike, Ryan White took the win, followed by Reg Pay on a 600. So he might be someone to watch for as things go along here towards the end of 2021.
Okay, and there's 2 more rounds of SOAR to go, September, and then that final round, October 1, 2, 3 weekend.
And then just this coming weekend is the big event at Springfield Mile for Labor Day weekend, which is an all-time classic race, Pat, and we certainly like covering American Flat Track. Yeah,
well, they've had a great season so far. I think that championship is probably going to go right down to the wire, and we'll see what happens at the Springfield Mile. There's 2 races that are going to take place on that weekend.
And that's it for Nodell's notes, Pat. We just I'll go right into the Yvon Duhamel picture, 17 for 17. And I thought this was a fitting one, sent in by Anne-Marie Friedman. It didn't make the cut last week, but when Jim Allen told us that story of Yvon scrapbooking all of his speeding tickets on the road and stuff, I thought, what else would be more fitting than him riding a street bike with, of course, his wife Sophie on the back, and I'm sure she was a huge part of his success.
Yeah, a very young Yvon Duhamel. This, of course, I think his first road racing bike was a BSA, and this is one that we shared. This, of course, was before the era of full-face helmets.
This is a classic photo of him on the Kawasaki.
Yeah, old familiar number 17, and of course his son Miguel adopted that number, except when he won championships and he had to carry the number 1 plate. And number 3 there. I guess he ran number 3 for a while. That's the race weekend where he got offered a ride on a Norton and went out there with almost no practice, and I think ended up winning the race. Of course, 1970 World Snowmobile Champion. As we covered last week, he was fast on just about anything. And there he is with Don Emdy, along with the late Dick Mann and Yvon there on his machine. And of course, he was a demon on the frozen lakes of Quebec. In fact, first form of motorcycle racing was on the ice in ice racing competition, and we did get confirmation that the guy there with the number 1 plate is in fact Michel Mercier, who also went on to be a pretty fine road racer. And Steve Baker, I think Stuart may have put this one in for you. Yvon and Sophie, of course, Trev Deeley, and a young Steve Baker. And Steve, I'm not sure who this young lady is, whether or not, she became your wife, but if not, that's okay as well.
Yeah, her name was Bonnie, and I was married to her for a while, but we're no longer together. But what a great picture, and brings back a lot of memories. And Trevor, what a nice man. He gave a lot of people a career in motorcycling that I certainly wouldn't have had the career I had without Trevor. He was a racer himself, and a really smart businessman. So,
Steve, did Trevor Deeley give you your first big, don't want to say factory ride, but support ride? How did that all come about?
Well, it all came about through Bob Work, and Bob Work went and talked to Trevor, and they put a deal together that they said, "Dave, we got this young kid that Bob Work believed in me." He says, "I think he can, he goes really good on a dirt track bike, and let's put him on a road racer and see what he does." And so they invited me to Westwood, and I won my first race in the novice class, at that time, I believe what they called it. But yeah, those two men were instrumental in my career totally for road racing. So.
Okay, I think we've got a few more of the 17 images we wanted to share. This was one, of course, Yvon being chased by your former teammate, Jim Allen. And then here he is, Gary Nixon. And Yvon at Daytona. And of course, the incomparable Barry Sheen and Yvon. And of course, towards the end of his career, got on to the superbikes when they were just getting started. And Steve, on last week's show, I think we mentioned this photo from the year that they went to Bol d'Or, I believe it was 1988. And Yvon got to ride with both Miguel and Mario.
Wow. Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah. Steve, I know you've done a little bit of what you would call vintage racing. We saw Yvon there on the Team Obsolete Matchless G50. And here he is, not that too many years ago, looking at, looks like some old brochure there of Kawasaki. And so we move to this picture of Steve Baker and Bob Work. Stuart, thanks for picking out those 17 images. Steve, before we get into talking about Bob Work and your special relationship with him, how do you remember Yvon Duhamel? How will you remember him as a fellow racer and competitor?
Well, because Bob Work helped Yvon and worked with Yvon previous to my coming to Yamaha. Yvon went to ride with Kawasaki, and so at that time, Bob was looking for a younger rider, I believe, and so Yvon was kind of my benchmark. I wanted to be as fast as he was, which was pretty difficult task at the time. But with the help of Bob Work, I eventually got there and could race with Yvon.
Indeed. So Steve, take us through the journey. Bob believes in you. You've been racing flat track. You go to Westwood. You quickly move up to the expert class. What was it like in those early years, 73, 74, working with Bob?
Well, you know, Bob was not only my boss and my mechanic and team organizer and everything, but he, you know, we worked together very, very closely. We were friends, you know, we were very close friends. And, you know, we were the ultimate team for many, many years, you know. I mean, we worked till the wee hours of the night on bikes to get ready to go to the next race together. And we drove, you know, loaded the van and we drove there to each racetrack, and, you know, we unloaded the bikes. And, you know, I mean, it was just, you know, to be with somebody like that that's so dedicated. And, you know, with his dedication, he made me more dedicated to the job I was, you know, supposed to be doing, you know, and I wanted to get better all the time because of Bob's attitude on the preparation. And, you know, he taught me good ethics, you know, about racing. And, you know, I'm still kind of in shock, you know, to lose a close friend like that. You know, we spent so much time together. And, you know, it's been, you know, a number of years since we've been together doing that stuff. But, you know, it was, you know, I grew up and I still have motorcycles in my blood. I work with them every day, you know, on the retail side. But, you know, this is what, in the beginning, what I was meant to do, you know. And when I got the chance that Bob Work and Trevor Deeley gave me, you know, it was like a dream come true, you know. And, you know, and to have somebody like Bob Work to basically mentor me. And, you know, because he's already seen how good riders do it, you know, like Yvon. And, yeah, it's, you know, I don't really know what to say, you know. It's just that, you know, Bob Work and myself, you know, we were a really good team. And we had some good results, and we had some hard knocks, and just like all racers get, you know. But, you know, in the end, we were very close friends. And, you know, I'll miss him, so.
Yeah, Stuart, maybe you can go back to that photo that you showed of Steve and Bob and the pit board showing number 1. And Steve, you must have remembered this. There, you and Bob. This certainly looks like it's Mo Sport, and you won the Canadian Championship, Steve, the new number 1. What do you remember of that day at Mo Sport where you and Bob were able to get it done and win the championship?
Well, you know, racing in Canada, I mean, it was, for me, the racetracks were very, very challenging. And, you know, to be able to win a championship in Canada was a big deal for me. And that's what Yamaha paid me to do, you know. And, you know, so there again, we, you know, being from the West Coast, we do one race on the West Coast and then drive clear across the continent, you know, the East Coast, and do another race, and then back to the West Coast for maybe a race in the US, you know. So to do 2 series and win the championship, this was the one, you know, the Canadian one is the one that we needed to win. And, you know, to achieve that, you know, you know, I had my teammate was Jimmy Dunn, and he had more experience than me, and you know, you know, he didn't hand the championship over to me. You know, I had to work for it, and, as well as Jim Allen. You know, Jim Allen was a very fierce competitor, and there again, Jim had more laps around places like Mossport and some of the tracks back east than I had. So, you know, it was a very challenging year, and you know, with the help of my best friend and my teammate Bob Work, we were able to achieve that.
Okay, Stuart, let's share some of the other photos that Bill Petro was so kind to send along. Steve, I didn't spend a lot of time with Bob in those early years when I started announcing, but he seemed to be very focused and intense, but in a good way. It was more focused than, you know, being overly intense. And I assume that is a relationship that built and grew over the years with all of the various racetracks that you guys did race at, including the Daytona 200 in 1977. What do you remember of that week working with Bob at Daytona? Because back then you were racing against all of the greatest riders in the world.
Well, in 77 to Daytona, we worked for factory Yamaha. And so, you know, me and Bob were still together as a team, but we were also aided by Yamaha factory mechanics. So it was a little, that started to be a little bit different for us because, you know, it changed our plans a little bit, you know, because, you know, the factory had more say on how things were going, you know, basically, versus Bob organizing everything. But, you know, we still had you know, we still had great success, and we, you know, Bob and myself, we worked together, and Bob would get the things I would need for the motorcycle. He would make sure was taken care of. And, you know, they always at Daytona was a fantastic weekend. And, you know, back then, you know, the reliability wasn't there as like today. So you know, if you to leave Daytona, just finish Daytona, you were, you know, pretty grateful. You know, and we had the best of the best being a factory rider at that time. And so, yeah, we had some good results. So
I was in Edmonton in 2014 when both you and Bob were inducted into the Canadian Motorcycle Hall of Fame. I think Stuart had a photo of Bob there. There's that photo that I said. That must have been extra special for you to go into the Hall of Fame at the same time as Bob. And what do you remember of that weekend, and what did you guys talk about and reminisce?
Well, we just, you know, we were just both really happy to see each other. You know, he lives quite a few miles from where I live, and so we just didn't get together as often as we should have. You know, like always happens in life sometimes. You know, but you know, Bob had a whole collection of pictures and stuff that we went through, and it was amazing. You know, that he had all that stuff stashed away. But it was very, very special that year, and you know, something I'll remember for the rest of my life. Definitely, you know, Bob Work deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. And, I'm there because of people like Bob Work, and, another thing, I remember at the Hall of Fame, and still today is a lot of people think I'm Canadian. And I said at that Hall of Fame, I'd be proud to be called a Canadian. So anyway.
Well, we adopted you a long time ago, Steve. And yeah, you guys made an amazing team. And as I said to Stuart, it was an honor to MC that Hall of Fame induction, because you guys go back to my first year of announcing. Stuart, we got any other images here of Bob?
That's it for the images I've got, Pat, that Bill Petra was so kind to share with us.
Yeah. Steve Baker, I want to thank you for coming on the show tonight and sharing your thoughts and memories of Bob Work. I've told Jim Allen that down the road we got to get you and Jim Allen and have a bit of a reunion of that Deeley Yamaha team from the early 70s here on Track Announcers Notebook. Hopefully we'll do that a little bit later in the fall. But Stuart, before we let Steve go and bring on Alex Duma, I think we've got a couple of questions or comments in the Q&A.
Yeah, we've got a couple of great comments, Pat. First from Henry DeGau, our friend in Florida. And he said that he was extremely proud to share the same racetrack as Steve back in the 1977 Daytona during his Daytona 200 win. And that all those that had watched Steve knew he was something very special, and so did the riders that raced with him.
Thank you very much, yeah.
And then the next comment comes in from Nathan Nasland, Pat, and he's pointed out that Steve was also a great snowmobile racer as well, just as Yvon Duhamel was. And he remembers watching him showing up at the big races back in Alberta and dominating.
Yeah, Yamaha.
Is that true, Steve? You like it, Yvon? You were pretty quick on a snowmobile.
Well, I hadn't got a lot of experience on snowmobiles, but Yamaha had me race them one year, and it took a bit of setup and some experience, and finally put things together. And it was a lot of fun. It was pretty spectacular to go that fast on the snow and ice. So yeah, it was a good winter, and but I was really glad to get to Daytona. So
yeah, I'm sure, as we all are. Steve, I want to thank you for coming on and sharing your memories and thoughts about Bob Work. We're going to certainly miss him, and as was the case a week prior to Bob's passing, Canadian motorcycle road racing, I think the world of road racing have lost two of our great icons in Yvon Duhamel and now Bob Work.
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
Thanks, Steve.
Okay, thanks, Pat. It's been a pleasure to be on the show with Pat and Stuart, and nice meeting you, Alex.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, wished all the best of luck for you and with your career. And yeah, it's great. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay, Steve, we'll catch up with you later.